morning. It is time for another Bible story. And before I read out of the Bible story book, I want to just again tell you where these stories are if you were to look in your Bible at home. So I'm going to go back to the bookshelf. And if you look at, again, Old Testament up here, story of God and his people Israel, and the New Testament down here. And if you look in your New Testament, if you go a little past halfway in your Bible and open it up to the New Testament, your first four books are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Those are the books that tell the story of Jesus' ministry, his life here on earth. And the story that we're going to read today, you can find in Matthew, or in Mark, or in Luke. So if you go to either one of those three books, then it has the story in there. I'll tell you which chapters here in just a moment. And again, this is something that a lot of people saw, and so a lot of people told other people about it, and so Matthew and Mark and Luke all wrote it down. And they wrote it down because it says something very important about Jesus, and it is one of my very, very favorite Bible stories. So let me put the bookshelf back and take the storybook again. So we're going to read about the friend of the little children. So it says Jesus and the children, and it's from Matthew 18 and 19. So again, if you turn to Matthew and you look for the big 18 or 19, that's the chapter. And then we're going to switch places. Miss Jennifer's going to hold the book, and I'm going to read it. So, if you go to Mark and you look for the big 10, that's chapter 10. And then if you look in Luke, you go to chapter 18. So, here's the story about Jesus and the little children. So, Jesus' friends were arguing. He had 12 friends that were close to him and that he spent almost all of his time with over 3.5 years. So, Jesus' friends were arguing. Who was the most important helper in God's kingdom? They wanted to know that. And that sounds like something that children would argue about, doesn't it? I am, James said. No, you're not, said Peter. I am. Nonsense, Matthew said. I'm the cleverest. No, you're not. Yes, I am. Yes, no, am too. Who sounds like children? The silliness went on and on like that for some time. You see, Jesus' friends had started thinking they had to do something to make themselves special to Jesus. That if they were the cleverest or the nicest or something, that Jesus would like them the best. You think that's the way that Jesus works? But they had forgotten something. Something God had been teaching his people all through the years. That no matter how clever you are, how good you are, how rich you are, how nice you are, how important you are, none of it makes any difference. Because God's love is a gift. And as anyone will tell you, the whole thing about a gift is it's free. All you have to do is reach out your hands and take it. You don't have to pay for gifts that you get. Instead, you just take them. So while Jesus' friends were arguing, some people who knew all about getting gifts, in fact, you might say they were gift experts, had come to see Jesus. Who were they? They were little children. Jesus' helpers tried to send them away. Jesus doesn't have time for you, they said. He's too tired. Shame on me. I do that sometimes with my own daughters. I'm really tired right now. Can we do this some other time? And that's what they were acting like grown-ups. Jesus doesn't have time for this right now. They were wrong. Jesus always had time for children. Don't ever send them away, Jesus said. Bring the little ones to me. Now, if you had been there, what do you think? Would you have had to line up quietly to see Jesus? You think Jesus would have asked you how good you'd been before he'd give you a hug? Would you have had to be on your best behavior and get dressed up and not speak until you're spoken to? Or would you have done just what these children did? Run straight up to Jesus and let him pick you up in his arms and swing you and kiss you and hug you and then sit you on his lap and listen to your stories and your chats. You see, children loved Jesus, and they knew they didn't need to do anything special for Jesus to love them. All they needed to do was to run into his arms, and that's just what they did. Well, after all the laughing and games, Jesus turned to his helpers and he said, no matter how big you grow, never grow up so much that you lose your child's heart, full of trust in God. Be like these children. They are the most important in my kingdom. That's one of my very favorite stories. Flip it back. It's one of my very favorite stories because sometimes you don't really know exactly what Jesus is doing. Whether he's sitting, whether he's standing, whether he's pulling on a net while they're fishing, whether he's just sitting watching them pull nets. But in this story, they're very careful to say that Jesus took the children into his arms. That he takes them and he hugs them and he sits them in his lap. Jesus doesn't stand there and put his hand on top of the children's head and say, look at this kid. Instead, Jesus is up close with them and really spends time with them. It's a lovely, lovely thing, and it's something to never, ever forget. And all through life, you may run into people that don't have time right now. But Jesus always, always has time. Have a great week.